Hey guys, today I'm going to be showing you how to install a balance shaft belt on your Porsche 944 engine. Alright guys, last time I got the timing belt put on this engine, and you can see that I have the guide rail on now. You want to make sure that this recessed area here is down at the bottom, because your balance shaft belt's going to go right across there and you don't want it striking this. I also have the roller on now, and I went ahead and put a yellow dot here so that way you could better see which way the timing belt tensioner is turned. So today we're going to be putting the balance shaft belt on this car, and I started out without the sprockets because if you've replaced the water pump and had to remove this cover, then you're going to need to remove these and need to know how to put them back on. So that's where we're going to get started. Alright guys, you can see I've got the factory service manual here. The first thing we're going to be doing is installing the sprockets. First thing it says to do is put a little bit of high temperature anti-seize on the bearing surface here. So here is our sprocket for our upper balance shaft, and you can see this O here, and when I get it over here you're not going to be able to see it very well, so what I'm going to do is put a little yellow dot right there on the O, and notice that that O is lined up with this keyway. So what I'm going to do here is line the woodruff key up with that O mark. So we now have our sprocket on, and for the upper balance shaft the woodruff key is going to go at the O position. And now we're going to be installing this cover plate here. You can see that there is a tab sticking up, and that tab is going to go in the other keyway that has no woodruff key in it, and you're going to be able to see the O mark through this round hole here. Next, you're going to want to torque down your bolt. You're going to need some Loctite 574 and torque it to 45 Newton meters. Now I'm just doing this for demonstration purposes, so I'm just going to go ahead and snug this down. Alright, now that that's snugged down, that's how you install the sprocket on your upper balance shaft. And keep in mind that this O mark isn't your timing mark. It only tells you where the woodruff key should be located. Your timing mark is actually on the back of the sprocket there. I went ahead and painted it yellow so it's easier for you guys to see. However, yours is going to look more like this here. So now I'm going to be installing the lower balance shaft sprocket, and again I put a yellow dot at the O mark, and instead of using this keyway this time, I'm actually going to be using the keyway that has no mark at all. You can see my woodruff key here, and that is where I'm going to be installing the sprocket. And you're going to have something like that. Again, I have the cover plate here and this tab sticking out. This time the tab goes at the O mark, and you can see the O mark through that slit there, and that indicates that you have your lower balance shaft sprocket on correctly. Next, you're going to take your Loctite and put it on your bolt, and then torque this down to 45 Newton meters. So now that I have these sprockets on, what I'm going to do is take and paint a yellow line here at the timing mark, so that way you can better see at home where my timing marks are. So there you go, there's my timing marks. You can see here that there is a notch on the back of the belt cover that I'm going to align this mark with. And down here there is this tab here, which this mark will line up with. So alright, the first thing I'm going to do is demonstrate what happens when you put the belt on with everything in time. You can see that I have the crank here at top dead center, and I also have the upper balance shaft on its mark, as well as the lower balance shaft. Next, I'm going to be installing the belt. The lower run of the balance shaft belt goes over top of the lower balance shaft. try and get as much slack out of this as possible. Next, I'm going to install the tensioner here. So you can see already there is a lot of slack in this belt, and as I move it around, it pulls everything out of timing. So I'm going to take my 27mm wrench here and attempt to tighten everything down, and as you can see, it's pulled my upper balance shaft out of time. So I have the balance shaft belt taken back off again, and as you can see, any slack on this side of the belt here would actually pull this one out of time like that when I went to tension it. The same goes for this. Any slack down here would pull this one out of time like that. So what I like to do is deliberately set things out of time, so that way when I go to tension it, everything lines up perfectly. So I'm going to take this upper balance shaft and move it back about a tooth here, and then I'm going to do the same here for this one. You want to be on this side of the notch there. And I'm going to do the same thing with the crank, because I want all the slack on this side of the belt, not this side, because this is the way the belt goes around. So now that everything is offset, I'm going to go ahead and install my belt here. Tensioner on. Alright, and I have the belt on, and you can see all my marks are off, and I have just loads of slack in this belt here. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and turn this one to the mark here, and that's going to remove the slack on this side here. And then I'm going to do the same for the crank and make sure that I get all the slack out here. Now both these marks are lined up. I'm now on top dead center, and this one is lined up. And watch as I go to install the tensioner here. It just pulls that lower balance shaft into perfect timing. So now everything is perfectly lined up as it should be. So now that everything's in perfect time, the only thing I have to do now is put my nut on and tighten it down. I'm going to let you guys see this up close here. See, my upper balance shaft here is in perfect time, and so is my crank and my lower balance shaft. And there you can see I turned this clockwise and locked it down there. So alright, once you have this locked down, what you want to do is use your gauge and make sure that you don't have your belt too tight. Again, a belt that's a little too loose is better than a belt that's a little too tight. I have mine exactly where I want it here. And keep in mind that unlike a cam that might snap after you have the belt too tight, or a water pump that might snap, these here will actually break the housing if you start putting too much tension on these belts. So you do not want that. Make sure that you have it a little bit too loose if you're not sure. So now that I have all this set, I'm going to be installing the roller here and showing you how to do that. Alright, you can see I've got my idler pulley on here, and first thing we're going to do is look at this diagram in the factory service manual. You can see that there is a 1/2 millimeter gap between the lower run of the belt and the idler. So that's why I've got my feeler gauge here. And next you'll want to notice that not only is this idler an eccentric, but it has the ability to move up and down as well. So that's going to come into play when you see this here. Now many people will tell you that if this idler touches the upper run of the belt, then it makes noise. So I've never experienced that, but you can see here that this is 0. That means without the idler, this is what the belt would look like if it wasn't in place, and this is 1 millimeter here. See, here it is lifted up, and it's lifting the belt up 1 millimeter. So that is what that means there. You should have a 1 millimeter tension on that upper run of the belt, and it should lift it up just like that. Now you don't want it to bow, but you do want it to come across like that. That is straight from the factory service manual. So, all right, like I mentioned before, not only is this an eccentric, but it also moves up and down like that. The first thing I'm going to do is take my feeler gauge and sit it between the lower run of the belt and the idler pulley, and that's going to give us our clearance there. The next clearance that we're looking for is right here. And before you do too much, you want to make sure that you pull all the slack out of this belt, because if you do this with slack in the belt, then you can actually push this out too far, and when you're driving down the road, it may have this bowed out further than you expected. So pull all the slack out like that, and you'll want to pre-tension it, about 1 millimeter or so. It says in the factory service manual. And then I'm going to set that with my 27 millimeter wrench here, like that. You can see it's pushing up against it, but just barely. So right, here's a better look with the idler installed. You can see that this isn't really bowing this out at all. I can still spin the roller, and down below we have a 0.5 millimeter gap between the idler and the lower run of the belt. So you can see it just barely deflected there, but as I mentioned, you can still spin that roller there, and that is exactly how it should be installed, and you can see it here in the factory service manual. So alright guys, that's how you change the balance shaft belt on a Porsche 944. So come along as I put one on a car. So hey guys, I've got two brand new balance shaft belts here. One is by Dayco and the other one is a Gates. And you can see that this Dayco belt here has little slits in the top of it. And it's supposed to make it a little bit quieter than the other belt, but I've never tried one. So I thought if you guys ever come across one of these, you'd like to know what that's for. And you can see that I have the Gates belt here, and it's just your average run-of-the-mill belt. So this is the one that I'm going to be installing, and this one's going to go back on the shelf since the customer ordered a Gates belt. But I thought that I would show them to you. They're installed exactly the same way, of course. So I'm going to be installing this Gates belt on this car, and let's get started then. So alright, here's the new balance shaft belt, and you can see that I've already got the sprockets on. So the only thing that I need to do is go around and set everything off timing, and that includes turning the crank back about a tooth, and then doing the same down here. I'm actually going to have to get down there to see it. Alright, so I have all my marks off now, and I'm going to go ahead and install my belt. So right now that the belt is on, I'm going to go ahead and move this upper balance shaft into time here, and then I'm going to go underneath, and I'm going to set the crank into position. Try and set the light up here and get all this in one take. So I have my ratchet here, and I'm just going to move all that slack over here over towards the lower balance shaft. That should be perfect right there, and I can remove that, and you'll see my lower balance shaft is still out of time, but all that slack is next to it. So I'm going to try and get this where I can get it with my 27 millimeter here and don't block the light, so that way you guys can see me pull the sprocket into position. So there you go guys, that's it. as I tensioned it, it brought the lower balance shaft into perfect timing. So now everything is timed up. Alright guys, I now have the tension set on my belt. And if you come over here, you can see that my mark at top dead center is perfect. And I'll show you the timing mark on my upper balance shaft is dead on as well. And I'll come down here and I'll show you the mark for my lower balance shaft is dead on as well. So everything is perfectly timed up. The only thing I need to do now is set that idler pulley there. Alright guys, it's gotten dark on me and I can't really show you what I'm going to be doing on the car, so I thought I'd just recap with this illustration here. First I'm going to be taking my 1/2 millimeter feeler gauge and putting it between the idler pulley and the lower run of the belt, just like that. And if you see this lower part here, that is showing you how the belt on the upper run should look when the idler pulley is not on. And then the second illustration is showing you what it should look like with it on. So what you want to do is remove the slack from the belt up here at the upper balance shaft to make sure you're pulled taut. And then you want to add about 1 millimeter preload to it. Not enough to really arc the belt, but just enough that it rubs against it. Alright guys, I now have the idler installed with a 1/2 millimeter clearance between the lower run. You're going to set that with the eccentric, and then you're going to put a 1 millimeter preload on the upper run using the slider. So basically you're going to have it in there and you can turn it with the eccentric, and you can also push it in and out like that, and that's how you're going to put your preload on this upper run. As I mentioned before, you shouldn't see any arcing or bowing here. You just want this to sort of rest against it. As you can see, I can still easily turn the pulley, so it's not really doing much here. It's only just putting the slightest preload on it. So that's going to do it, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.